Hi, people. The subject I'm talking about here is something that I cautiously welcome. I see it as good news for the most part, but it's also a point to reflect on the sort of so-called protest that just really doesn't work. It's a sort of protest that demonstrates a contempt for public opinion, as opposed to, for example, the sort of protests we're seeing now in Turkey, which is growing momentum. I'm seeing tens of thousands of people on the street against the Erdogan dictatorship. Um, I refer to Just Stop Oil. So they have announced that as of the end of this month, they will cease activities, they'll disband. That, of course, is very welcome because I think they're an utterly obnoxious group. But if they're expecting any thanks, they're deluded. I'm going to just read out a comment from the Eye. This is by Stuart Lonsdale, 29th of March, of Pontefract in West Yorkshire. I read with amazement that Just Stop Oil claimed it was one of the most successful civil resistance campaigns in recent history. If they talk to people outside their group, they might find that the animosity they have generated has hindered more than helped to push for carbon zero. That's absolutely true. Now, ostensibly, the reason Just Stop Oil's made this announcement is because they think that they've won, on the grounds that the government isn't going ahead with new oil and gas contracts. I have no love lost for the likes of Shell, particularly the greedy CEOs, and you know, I'm not really interested in standing up for the likes of those companies. But I have to say that I've seen Greenpeace putting out a lot of campaigns recently whining about the fact that they're being sued. Well, if you take infantile tactics, if you engage in criminal activity like trespassing and vandalism, you can't really play the victim. My problem with a lot of environmental groups is not so much their purported cause, but the way they go about it. Um, Greenpeace is a lot older than Just Stop Oil, but they've effectively defended Just Stop Oil. I will also say that groups like Amnesty International, which I've long had respect for, it's disappointing that they are conflating legitimate police actions against protest to be a crackdown on protest itself. What about the human rights of the majority that are affected? That's something that is constantly ignored when we talk about the rights of protest, and it really frustrates me. The truth is, Just Stop Oil have been an immensely unpopular movement. I think that they are extremely deluded if they think that they've got public support. I think that they have a contempt for the public. I mean, they'll always say they want to protect future generations, but all they have done is infuriate people. And this isn't even a right wing, left wing thing. Because one tendency you see from Just Stop Oil activists and their supporters, you get the occasional supporter come out of the woodwork is, oh, you must be a climate change skeptic. So they present this as black and white. If you don't agree with their tactics, then you're a climate change skeptic and you don't care about the earth. I do recognize problems that are urgent. I recognize, for example, the huge problem of plastic waste in our oceans. That has to be tackled. I would ban those cheap, tacky toys that McDonald's produces. Children play with them for 5 minutes and they're thrown away. That is an absolute waste. Things like that, do need to be scrutinized. Um, but aside from the obnoxious tactics, you have to also consider some of their demands. It's just not realistic. If Just Stop Oil had their way, they said they wanted to stop oil and gas. Now, they say that they're stopping the protests. I don't know. What we've seen from them is they're very egotistical, especially the likes of Phoebe Plummer, and there's another guy, Edward Whittingham, I think he's called, who are extremely full of themselves. They kind of see themselves as revolutionary heroes, and they want to be arrested because they see it as a mark of honor. Um, I just find it obnoxious that they think that they are somehow comparable to dissidents in a totalitarian state. I mean, they talk about civil resistance, making that's actually comparing themselves to those who struggled for Indian independence in the 30s. It's obnoxious. I mean, the big difference with Just Stop Oil and a lot of famous social movements of the 20th century is they had public support. Just Stop Oil has almost no public support. They're immensely unpopular. And the reason they're immensely unpopular is because of their obnoxious tactics. They have deliberately stopped people getting to weddings, funerals, medical appointments. It's really quite disgusting when you think about it. They think that they can play God. They think that they can mess with people's lives this way. And Just Stop Oil is the latest incarnation, but it started with Extinction Rebellion, then Insulate Britain. I think the British Transport Police response to that was utterly pathetic, offering the cups of tea. One of the worst examples of policing I've seen in recent years. Um, but really, in terms of, in the court of public opinion, they've utterly failed. Um, I recently, the Metro, pointing out that they hit a new low by vandalising the grave of Charles Darwin. Now, I ask you, what will that do to help flood victims in Spain or the Philippines, the typhoon victims in the Philippines, struggling farmers in Ethiopia? These people are utterly deluded. They're more interested in the self-aggrandizing stunts. I'm talking to you, Phoebe Plummer, than it's made them minor celebrities. Some of the hardcore activists have become quite prominent. But if I was an employer, I would look at someone like Phoebe Plummer and say, no, you're not. I wouldn't give you a job. And I also think I would like to see them blacklisted from any public museum or venue in the country for the foreseeable future. Um, I mean, they're prominent enough now; they should just be blacklisted. Um, I am pleased that some of the hardcore activists, for example, who invaded motorways, got custodial sentence. It's absolutely justified. And no Amnesty International, they're not jailed for having an opinion. Because unfortunately, some human rights groups that I did have respect for are talking about this crackdown and protests. This is a very, very important thing to consider. People are not being jailed in these situations for having an opinion. They're being jailed for things like highway trespassing, endangering life. They're not being jailed because they have strong views on CO2. That is an absolute fallacy. It's false. It's a lie. And that it's very important, I think, to set the record straight. Ed Miliband may come under scrutiny if, has he pandered to these groups due to government policy that we're currently seeing? I don't know. But I welcome it, an end to this, meaning an end to deliberately stressing out the public is a good thing. But if they think they're going to get any thanks or credit whatsoever, they are deluded. A lot of them are lucky they're not in prison. They deserve nothing but contempt for the public. They're a nasty, undemocratic, incredibly vain bunch of people. And it's just really, you know, that's their legacy. But more broadly, when we look at protests, Turkey right now, thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of people protesting against the dictatorship of Erdogan. That is the sort of protest that has genuine public support. Whether it's a majority or not is a matter of debate, but Just Stop Oil is massively unpopular. Occasionally, you'll see a few public supporters come out, and have one or two celebrity supporters like Chris Packham and Emma Thompson, but by and large, they're deeply unpopular for a reason. That's their legacy. I am pleased that they're going to sort of fade away now, hopefully. Um, One thing that's changed has been less media coverage. That's a good thing. I understand that, you know, blocking a motorway is newsworthy, but I was critical of the number of interviews they got. I think the victims should have got more interviews. But the way they condescend people, we're helping future generations. What you're doing is playing God. What you're doing is thinking that you can mess with people's lives. You're a disgrace. And don't say that you're environmentalists. You're not. You're saboteurs and criminals. Um, I also think the way the press has referred to them as protesters constantly, they should be called what they are: saboteurs, criminals, offenders. That what has to be really scrutinized is the tyranny of the minority. This idea that simply hiding behind protest makes you right. It's a very totalitarian idea, actually. These people act like mini tyrants. So Just Stop Oil. You deserve no credit. You deserve no thanks. You deserve nothing but contempt. And if you decide to go back to your little stunts, I hope that swift, um, stiff prison sentences follow. You're lucky that you've got away with so much for so long. Do not dare compare yourself to people who are actually struggling in this world, like dissidents in Putin's regime or other parts of the world. Do not dare compare yourself to people who are actually struggling. You're just a bunch of entitled narcissists, and the public are sick of you.